They made his wife serve drinks at the wedding he threw for another woman. His family mocked her apron. His mistress slipped a single dollar into her hand and called it generous. For 3 hours, she stayed silent, carrying trays through a ballroom filled with people who believed she was nothing. Not one of them knew whose name was on every deed, every contract, and every brick around them. The ballroom glowed like a dream that belonged to someone else. Crystal hung from the ceiling in long ropes of light. White roses spilled from every table. A band played something soft and slow, and 300 guests in their finest clothes laughed and clinked their glasses and pretended they were better than they were. In the middle of all that beauty, a woman in a borrowed catering uniform carried a tray of champagne. Her name was Aday's Belle. Most people who knew her called her Ada. Tonight, nobody called her anything at all. She moved through the crowd the way water moves around stone, quiet, smooth, unbothered on the surface. Her back was straight. Her hands were steady. The black apron tied around her waist was too big, and the white shirt scratched her neck, but her face gave away nothing. She was good at giving away nothing. She had practiced it for years. At the front of the room, under an arch of flowers, stood the man she had married 6 years ago, Marcus Bell. Tall, handsome, smiling that easy smile that had once made her believe in forever. He wore a tailored tuxedo. His shoes shined like black glass, and beside him stood the woman he was about to marry. Her name was Renee. She wore a gown the color of fresh cream and diamonds at her throat, and a smile that knew exactly how much it was hurting people. She slid her arm through Marcus's and leaned close and whispered something that made him laugh. Ada watched them from across the room. Then she looked away and kept walking. A guest lifted a glass off her tray without saying thank you. Another waved her over and pointed at an empty water pitcher like she was a machine that had failed. She filled it. She smiled. She moved on. A woman in a red dress snapped her fingers at Ada twice, fast, the way you'd call a dog. "More of these," she said, holding up an empty glass and not looking at Ada's face. Ada brought more. A man spilled wine on his own sleeve, and somehow it became Ada's fault, and she apologized for it, and he grunted and turned away. None of them looked at her. To 300 well-dressed people, she was furniture that moved, a pair of hands, a uniform with no person inside it. That was the cruelest part, not the words, the not seeing. This was the wedding of the man who was still, in the eyes of the law, her husband. The divorce papers sat unsigned in a drawer somewhere. Marcus had never bothered to finish what he started. He never finished anything. He just left it behind and walked toward the next bright thing. Tonight, the bright thing wore cream and diamonds. "You, girl." A sharp voice cut across the noise. Ada turned. It was Loretta, Marcus's mother, a small woman with a tall opinion of herself, wrapped in gold and perfume strong enough to taste. She had never liked Ada. She had spent 6 years making sure Ada knew it. "Yes, ma'am," Ada said. Loretta's eyes ran over the catering uniform, and something cruel curled at the corner of her mouth. She knew exactly who she was talking to. She had asked for this. She had told Marcus it would be poetic. "The help should stay near the kitchen," Loretta said, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "We don't want our guests confused about who belongs at the party and who belongs serving it." A few people chuckled. Ada felt their eyes on her like heat. She lowered her head. "Of course," she said softly. Loretta smiled, satisfied, and turned back to her friends. "Some people," she said to them, "just never learn their place." Ada walked toward the kitchen wall and stood there with her tray. Her heart beat slow and hard. She breathed in. She breathed out. The blueprint folded in the pocket beneath her apron, pressed against her hip, and she let herself feel it there, the one true thing in this whole false room. She did not cry. She had cried all her crying years ago. The night was just beginning. Renee found her by the windows an hour later. The mistress drifted over with a glass already in her hand, her gown whispering against the marble floor. Up close, she was even more beautiful and even colder. She looked at Ada the way a person looks at furniture they are deciding whether to keep. "You're the ex," Renee said, not a question. "I'm serving champagne," Ada said. Renee laughed, a small, bright sound. "Marcus told me you'd take it badly, but look at you, so calm." She tilted her head. "You really were just the quiet type, weren't you? No wonder he got bored." Ada said nothing. She held her tray. Renee reached into the little purse hanging from her wrist and pulled out a single-dollar bill. She folded it once, slowly, watching Ada's face the whole time. Then she pressed it into Ada's free hand and closed Ada's fingers around it like she was doing her a kindness. "For your trouble," Renee said. "I'm generous. Marcus always says I'm too generous." She smiled. "Buy yourself something nice." Then she turned and walked back into the light, and the diamonds at her throat threw little sparks across the wall. Ada looked down at the dollar in her hand. $1. For her trouble. She did not throw it down. She did not crush it. She slid it into her apron pocket, right next to the folded blueprint, and she let the two things sit side by side. The smallest insult and the largest secret, touching in the dark. A young waiter passed close and saw her face. He paused. He was maybe 19, nervous, new to this kind of work. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "are you okay? You don't have to take that from her. I'm fine," Ada said, and she smiled at him, and it was a real smile, warm and tired. "Thank you for asking. Most people don't." The boy nodded and moved on, glancing back once. Ada carried her tray toward the far doors, where the hotel's front desk could be seen through the glass. A man in a sharp gray suit stood behind that desk, the hotel's night manager. He looked up as she passed, and his whole body went still. His eyes widened, his mouth opened. "Mrs." he started. Ada looked at him, just looked, one small shake of her head. The manager closed his mouth. He swallowed. He gave the smallest nod and turned away, suddenly very busy with his computer screen. The few guests near the door had not noticed. They were too busy being important. But the waiter who had spoken to Ada had noticed. He stood frozen with his empty tray, staring at the manager, then at the woman in the borrowed uniform, and a question grew on his young face that he did not dare ask. Why was the night manager of this five-star hotel afraid of a waitress? To understand the woman in the apron, you have to go back, far back, to a place that smelled of soap and steam and warm cotton. A laundromat on the south side of the city. Small, old. The kind of place people walked past without seeing. A girl grew up in that laundromat. She was maybe 10 years old, with skinny arms and serious eyes, and she spent her evenings folding strangers' clothes while other children played outside. Her grandmother owned the place. Her grandmother was raising her because there was no one else left to do it. Grandma Esther was a tall, slow-moving woman with hands like worn leather and a voice like a hymn. She had buried a husband and a daughter and most of her dreams, and still she got up every morning and opened the doors and ran the machines and treated every customer like company. "Child," she would say, watching young Ada count quarters into neat little stacks. Money is a quiet thing. You hear me? The loud kind doesn't last. People who shout about what they have are usually about to lose it. She would tap the counter with one finger. Build quiet. Loud money makes loud enemies. Quiet money makes you free. Ada didn't understand it then, but she remembered it. She remembered everything her grandmother said. The laundromat barely made enough to keep them fed. Some winters they wore their coats indoors to save on heat. Some nights, dinner was rice and whatever was cheap that week. But there was love in that little building, thick and steady, and Ada never once felt poor inside it. She learned things in that laundromat that no school ever taught. She learned that a tired woman with 3 loads and 2 crying babies needed kindness more than she needed change. She learned that the man who came in every Sunday in his only good suit was washing it himself because he had no one else. She learned to see people, really see them, to notice what the world walked past. "Look close, baby," Esther used to say, watching her granddaughter watch the customers. "Everybody's carrying something heavy. The trick is, you never let them know you saw it. You just make their load a little lighter and you keep your mouth shut about it." She'd smile. That's the whole secret to being a good person. And a rich one, too, though folks don't believe me when I say it. Ada believed her. Ada believed every word that woman ever spoke. There was a jar on the counter, an old glass jar that had once held pickles. Esther kept it half full of quarters. Whenever a customer was short, whenever somebody counted their coins twice and came up empty, Esther would wave a hand at the jar. "Take what you need, bring it back when you can, or don't." Most people brought it back. Some brought back double. The jar never ran dry, and young Ada never forgot the lesson buried in it. Generosity given quietly comes home with interest. When she was 17, her grandmother got sick. It happened fast. One month, Esther was running the machines. The next, she could barely cross the room. Ada dropped everything. She sat by the bed. She held the leather hands. Near the end, Esther reached under her pillow and pulled out a folded piece of paper, soft with age. She pressed it into Ada's hands the way, years later, a cruel woman would press a single dollar. But this was different. This was everything. "This building," Esther whispered. "It's yours now, paid for, free and clear. It isn't much." She squeezed Ada's fingers. "But it's the first brick, baby. You hear me? Every big thing starts with one brick that's truly yours. Don't you let nobody take your bricks." The paper was the deed to the laundromat, and tucked inside it, the old blueprint of the building, drawn by hand long ago. Esther died 3 days later, holding her granddaughter's hand. Ada was 17, alone, and the owner of one small, struggling laundromat on a forgotten street. She did not sell it. She kept her grandmother's first brick, and she got to work. She worked the way drowning people swim. By day, she went to community college and studied numbers, contracts, property. By night, she ran the laundromat herself. She fixed the broken machines instead of replacing them. She painted the walls. She stayed open later. She learned every customer's name. Then she did the thing her grandmother's quiet wisdom had planted in her. She watched. She listened. She noticed that the empty storefront next door had been closed for years, the owner desperate to be rid of it. She saved every dollar, took a small loan against the building she owned free and clear, and she bought that empty store for almost nothing. She fixed it up. She rented it out. The rent paid the loan and then some. 1 brick became 2. 2 became 4. She found buildings nobody wanted, on streets everyone had given up on, and she saw what they could be instead of what they were. She bought low. She fixed what was broken. She was patient in a way that made older investors uneasy, because patience is a kind of power they could not buy. There were hard years. Years she ate at her desk because she could not afford to stop. Years when a deal fell through and she lay awake doing the math over and over, certain she had lost everything. Once, a developer twice her age laughed her out of a meeting and told her to go home and find a husband. She did not argue. She bought the block out from under him 18 months later and let the silence be her answer. She never gloated. Her grandmother had taught her that too. You don't have to tell people you won. They find out. She never put her name on the front of anything. She built her companies behind quiet names, holding companies stacked inside holding companies, the way her grandmother had taught her without ever knowing the word for it. Loud money makes loud enemies. So Ada made quiet money, and a lot of it. By the time she was 30, the skinny girl from the laundromat owned more of the city than almost anyone alive. Office towers, shopping centers, 3 hotels, the very ground beneath buildings whose owners thought they owned them. She gave away fortunes she never spoke of. She paid the college tuition of dozens of kids from her old neighborhood every year and signed the checks with a name they would never trace. And she still kept the laundromat. And she still carried the folded blueprint everywhere she went. Then she met Marcus Bell. He was charming. That was the first thing, and maybe the only thing, that was true about him. They met at a fundraiser she attended without telling anyone what she really was. He thought she was a modest woman with a modest job and a quiet life. He liked that. He liked feeling like the big one, the bright one, the man who would lift her up. Ada knew exactly what he thought she was, and she let him think it. Because for once in her careful, guarded life, she wanted to be loved for nothing but herself. Not her buildings, not her fortune. Just Ada. So she never told him. They married in a small ceremony. Marcus had big dreams and small results. He started businesses that failed. A restaurant, a clothing line, a nightclub. Each one collapsed within a year, and each time he came home heavy with debt and shame. In the early days, Ada loved him with everything she had kept locked away for years. She had spent her whole life being careful, being quiet, holding the world at arm's length. With Marcus, for a little while, she set it down. She cooked for him. She listened to his dreams late into the night and never once told him they wouldn't work. When he failed, she held him. She was, for the first time since her grandmother died, not alone. And each time he failed, quietly, a mysterious investor appeared and saved him, cleared the debts, kept the lights on, asked for almost nothing in return. Marcus never knew the investor was his own wife. Ada protected him from the dark, again and again, from the shadows, the way she did everything. She told herself it was love. Maybe it was. Or maybe it was the only way she knew to be needed without being known. But a man who is always rescued and never told begins to believe he rescued himself. Marcus grew prouder as he grew weaker. The more she gave from the shadows, the smaller he made her in the light. He started to come home late. He stopped asking about her day. He started to look at his quiet wife and see someone small, someone beneath him, someone holding him back. He started looking at other women. He found Renee at one of his failed nightclubs. She was sharp and hungry, and she smelled money on him. Money she didn't know was borrowed from his wife's hidden hand. She told him he was a lion, married to a mouse. She told him he deserved better. He believed her because it was what he had wanted to believe all along. And one day, the quiet wife found a single long earring in the passenger seat of the car, and she understood. And something in her, Some last soft thing went still and cold. She did not scream. She did not beg. She started to plan. The wedding was Loretta's idea of perfect revenge. It was Marcus who suggested Ada work the event. He framed it like a favor, like mercy. "You need money, don't you?" he'd said, not knowing how badly he was about to look. "The caterer's short on staff. You can earn a little. And, honestly," he'd added, "it'll help you accept reality. See me move on. It's good for you." Loretta had clapped her hands when she heard. "Poetic," she'd called it. The first wife pouring drinks for the second. Let everybody see who won. Ada had listened to all of it with her face perfectly calm. And then she had said yes. Yes, she would work the wedding. They thought she said yes because she was broken, because she had nowhere else to go, because the mouse had finally accepted that the lion was leaving. They did not know they had just invited the owner of the building to walk their humiliation through her own front doors. That is how she ended up here, on this glowing night, in a borrowed apron, with a single dollar and a folded blueprint sitting side by side in her pocket. Now, you know what they didn't. The betrayal got louder as the night went on. Marcus stood and tapped his glass, and the room hushed for his toast. He thanked everyone for coming. He thanked his mother. He looked out over the crowd with a smile that had fooled Ada once, long ago. "Some of you," he said, "know I came from a hard road. I built myself up with my own two hands." A few people clapped. Ada, standing against the wall with her tray, kept her face still. "And along the way," Marcus went on, "I had to learn a painful truth. Sometimes the person beside you isn't lifting you up. Sometimes they're dead weight, cold, ungrateful." His eyes found Ada across the room. He did not say her name. He didn't have to. The guests followed his gaze, and a ripple of cruel amusement moved through the ballroom. "But then," Marcus said, turning to Renee, "you find someone who sees the real you, who saved you from all that." He took Renee's hand. "To the woman who rescued me." The room erupted in applause. Ada stood very still. She had pulled his businesses out of the fire 4 separate times. She had paid debts he never saw. She had loved him in the only language she knew, the quiet language of sacrifice. And now he stood in a room she owned and thanked another woman for rescuing him. She thought of all of it in the space of a single breath. The nights she'd stayed up moving money so he could keep his pride. The mornings she'd watched him leave without a word. The way he used to laugh, back when the laugh was real. The way she had given and given and given into a hole that only grew wider, because somewhere deep down she had believed that if she just loved him enough, quietly enough, completely enough, he would finally turn around and see her. He never turned around. He was looking at Renee. For one moment, just one, the calm cracked. She turned and walked quickly toward the back hallway, past the kitchen, to a quiet corner where the music was only a murmur. She set down her tray. Her hands were shaking. Her breath came short. The years pressed down on her all at once. Every insult, every night she'd stayed silent, every dollar she'd given without a word of thanks. She leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. For a moment she was 17 again, holding a leather hand in a small, dark room, being told she was about to be alone. She had survived that. She had survived losing the only person who ever truly knew her. And she had spent the years since building walls so high that a man like Marcus could live behind them for 6 years and never find the door. Maybe that was her fault too. Maybe she had loved him the only way she knew how, which was from the shadows, and a person can't love what they can't see. But that was over now. She heard footsteps. Two women from the catering crew came down the hall, not seeing her in the shadows, talking low. "Did you hear?" one said. "The new bride's already planning to redo the man's suite, the big one upstairs. She was telling everybody she's gonna finally make it hers." The other laughed, acting like she owns the place. They moved on. Ada opened her eyes. The big suite upstairs, the penthouse of this hotel, the hotel she had bought 8 years ago through a holding company 3 names deep. Renee was planning to redecorate a room inside a building that belonged, down to the last brick, to the woman she had handed $1. Something settled in Ada then. The shaking stopped. She reached into her apron pocket. She took out the folded blueprint, her grandmother's first brick, soft as cloth from all the years of carrying. She pressed it flat against the wall with both hands, the way you smooth something you love. "Build quiet, child. Don't you let nobody take your bricks." "I won't, Grandma," she whispered. "I never did." She folded the blueprint again. She put it back in her pocket, and then she untied the catering apron from around her waist and let it fall to the floor. She did not pick it back up. In the ballroom, Loretta was reaching for the microphone. She had been waiting all night for this. With Marcus's toast still warm in the air, she wanted her own moment. She tapped the mic and beamed at the crowd. "Before we cut the cake," Loretta said, "I just want to thank all the wonderful staff working so hard tonight." Her eyes swept the room and landed with delight on the spot where Ada had been standing. Especially one server in particular. Some of you know her story. Let's just say she's learning, finally, what it means to serve her betters. Let's give the help a round of... The ballroom doors opened. Not the kitchen doors, the grand front doors. And through them came 3 people in dark, expensive suits, walking fast, walking with purpose. The hotel's general manager, a tall man with a leather folder, and a woman holding a slim briefcase. The room turned to look. Loretta's words died in the microphone. The 3 of them did not stop at the entrance. They crossed the entire ballroom, past the flowers and the cake and the staring guests, and they stopped in front of the woman who stood near the back wall with no apron on. And then the general manager of the hotel, in front of 300 guests, lowered his head in respect. "Mrs. Bell," he said clearly, "we came as soon as you signaled. Everything is in order, whenever you're ready." The silence that fell over that ballroom was the deepest silence those walls had ever held. Marcus stared. Loretta's hand froze on the microphone. Renee's smile slipped, just slightly, like a mask coming loose. Ada stepped forward. She was still in the white catering shirt, but she did not look like staff anymore. She looked like what she had always been underneath. She took the leather folder from the tall man and held it without opening it. "Thank you," she said to the manager. "You can stand up." He straightened. The woman with the briefcase moved to Ada's side. "What is this?" Marcus said. His voice cracked on the second word. "Ada, what are you doing? Who are these people?" Ada looked at him for a long, quiet moment. Then she looked around the room, at the chandeliers, the marble, the flowers, the 300 faces. "This hotel," she said, and her voice was soft, but it carried to every corner, "is called the Meridian. It's the finest in the city. People wait a year to hold a wedding here." She paused. "I bought it 8 years ago, through a company, whose name you would not recognize because I made sure of that." A murmur ran through the crowd like wind through grass. "The building your restaurant was in, Marcus," she went on, gently, almost kindly. "The one that failed. I owned that too. The bank that cleared your debts when the nightclub closed. the investor who appeared every time out of nowhere and saved you. She let the words land. There was never any investor. There was only me. Marcus's face had gone gray. I built it from one laundromat, Ada said. From one brick my grandmother left me. I built it quiet, the way she taught me, because I learned a long time ago that the people who shout about what they have are usually the ones about to lose it. Her eyes moved just once to Loretta, then to Renee. I never needed any of you to know what I was. I only needed one of you to love me without it. She looked at Marcus. And you couldn't even do that. The room was so quiet now, you could hear the band's instruments resting against their stands. You told them I was dead weight, Ada went on, her voice never rising. Cold, ungrateful. You stood in this room and you let them laugh at me. She shook her head slowly. Marcus, I cleared 4 mountains of your debt with my own hands. I kept your name out of the dirt while you slept easy. The only ungrateful person in this room has been standing at the front of it all night, holding another woman's hand. Marcus's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. Renee found her voice, sharp, scrambling. You're lying. This is some kind of stunt. Marcus, she's bluffing. She's nothing. She's... Ada reached into the pocket of the white shirt and pulled out a $1 bill, folded once. She walked across the floor, the whole room watching, and she stopped in front of Renee. She placed the dollar gently on the table beside her, the way you'd return something that was never yours. For your trouble, Ada said quietly. I'm generous, too. What happened next happened fast, the way a building falls once the first beam goes. Ada turned to the woman with the briefcase. Begin, she said. The lawyer opened the case and began to speak in calm, clear sentences that fell on the room like cold rain. The financing that had kept Marcus's current business breathing was a line of credit from one of Ada's companies. As of midnight, that credit was withdrawn. The loans were called due. The personal guarantees Marcus had signed without reading were now in the hands of people who intended to collect every cent. Marcus sat down hard in a chair that wasn't his. His dreams were collapsing in real time, and he could feel each one go. The man who had stood up minutes ago to claim he built himself with his own 2 hands now understood, in front of everyone, that he had never built anything. He had only ever been carried, and the woman who carried him had just set him down. Ada, he said, and his voice was small now, stripped of all its easy charm. Ada, please, we can talk. I didn't know. I didn't know what you were. I know you didn't, Ada said gently. That was the whole point. I wanted to be loved as nothing. And the second you thought I was nothing, you showed me exactly who you were. She looked at him without anger now, only a kind of tired sadness. Thank you for that. It saved me years. Renee did the math faster than he did. Her eyes flicked from the shaking man beside her to the calm woman across the room, and the truth arranged itself behind her face. The money was never his. The lion was a borrowed costume. There was nothing here for her. She picked up her cream-colored skirts. I need air, she said coldly, and she walked out of the wedding she had spent a year planning, and she did not look back at the groom even once. She had come for an empire. She would not stay for a man. Loretta was still holding the microphone. She set it down very slowly. The lawyer turned to her next. The family home that Loretta had bragged about for 30 years, the proof of their old money, carried a lien. It had been quietly bought up through one of Ada's companies 2 years ago, when Marcus borrowed against it and never told his mother. The woman who had told Ada to know her place now learned, in front of every friend she had, exactly how little ground she had been standing on. Loretta sank into her chair, her gold and her perfume suddenly looking like what they always were. Costume, noise, loud money, finally lost. Through it all, Ada stood quiet. There was one more thing. From the side of the room, an older man stepped forward, hesitant. Uncle Theo, Marcus's uncle. The one man in that family who had always greeted Ada warmly, who had brought her tea the first time she met them, who had never once made her feel small. He didn't ask for anything. He just looked at her, confused and a little afraid like everyone else. Ada walked over and took his hand. "Not you," she said softly, so only he could hear. "You were kind to me when kindness cost you nothing and earned you nothing. I don't forget that. Whatever happens to the rest, you'll be taken care of. You have my word." The old man's eyes filled. He nodded, unable to speak. Ada let go of his hand. She handed the leather folder back to the manager. Then she walked across her own ballroom, through the wreckage of a wedding that was never real, past the gray-faced man she had once promised forever, past the fallen woman who had told her to know her place, and she walked out the grand front doors with her head high and her steps even. She did not slam the door. She didn't have to. She drove south, away from the lights, until the buildings got smaller and the streets got older and the air smelled like home. She stopped in front of a small building on a forgotten corner. The old laundromat, except it wasn't a laundromat anymore. It was a community center now. Bright paint, big windows, a sign out front in plain letters that read, "Esther's Place. Free tutoring, meals, and a warm room for anybody who needs one." Ada let herself in with her own key. Inside, it was clean and quiet and warm. On the back wall, in a simple wooden frame, hung an old, hand-drawn blueprint, the first brick, right where everyone could see it. She stood in front of it for a long while in the dark. She thought about the girl who had folded strangers' clothes in this very room. She thought about the woman who had cried herself empty over a man who never saw her. She thought about the apron lying on a hallway floor across the city, and the single dollar she had set down and walked away from. She thought about her grandmother, gone all these years, and how much of her was still here, in the paint and the warm room, and the jar of quarters she still kept on the front counter, half full, the way Esther always kept it. Take what you need, bring it back when you can, or don't. She did not feel triumphant. That surprised her. She just felt quiet. The good kind of quiet. The kind her grandmother used to carry like a lamp. She had spent 6 years giving herself away to a man who could not see her. And in the end, she had not lost anything that was truly hers. The bricks were still hers, the first one, framed on the wall, and every one after it. They had tried to make her small, and they had only shown the world how small they were. In the morning, a girl came in, maybe 16. Sharp eyes, skinny arms, a chip on her shoulder, and a hunger behind it that Ada recognized in her bones. The girl was looking for work, anything to help her grandmother pay rent. Ada looked at her for a moment. Then she smiled. "Can you count?" Ada asked. "Better than anybody," the girl said, lifting her chin. "Good," Ada said, and she handed her an apron, a clean one nobody would ever use to humiliate her. "Then let's start you here, front desk. You'll learn the rest." She paused. "And let me tell you the first thing my grandmother told me. You listening?" The girl nodded. "Build quiet," Ada said. "Loud money makes loud enemies. The world is going to look at you and think you're nothing. Let them. While they're busy thinking it, you go on and build. One brick at a time, and don't you ever let anybody take your bricks." The girl frowned a little, turning the words over. "What if somebody's bigger than me?" she asked. "What if they got more than me already?" Ada smiled. "Baby, the man who threw the biggest party in this city last night woke up this morning with nothing, and I built everything I own out of a room smaller than this one." She put a hand on the girl's shoulder. "Bigger doesn't mean stronger. Louder doesn't mean richer. You remember that, and you'll be all right." The girl didn't fully understand it, not yet, but she would. Ada could see it in her eyes. She would remember every word. Some bricks you lay in buildings, some you lay in people. The strongest empire that woman ever built was never made of stone at all. And the loudest room in the world will never be as strong as one quiet person who knows exactly who she is. If Ada's quiet strength moved you, don't leave her story in silence. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments, would you have stayed quiet for 3 hours or walked out the moment they handed you that tray? Your story matters here. Stay, and I'll tell you another one.